For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future. What do you say? Let's manage your financial future. Why? Well, because I'm here, your podcast host, Johnny Dean. Professor Plum, you're here in the studio.
I am.
So why not, you know? Otherwise, you and I just sit around talking.
But we have a lot of fun doing it.
We really do. It's funny. You come in to do a podcast, and we sit here for like 20 minutes. You'd think we'd be talking about what we're going to say on the show.
Like finance and things? Nah.
Partially, no. We were just talking about MASH episodes before we came on. And now I'm going to make you look one of them up.
You brought up a line I don't remember.
And, you know, the funny thing is nobody except you and I and people older than us really know anything about MASH. So,
and then only the weird ones at that.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, so we're going to manage your financial future. Now, okay, so the last few weeks were
heavy.
Were we heavy? Were we getting into the weeds and technical stuff? I don't know.
I think so.
Well, we probably were. And so today I want to sort of make it a little bit more I don't want to say easy to understand, but let's lighten it up a little bit. How's that?
For the summer doldrums, we don't want to make it too heavy.
Actually, where are we now? Summer's almost over, right?
Yeah.
We're in September, I believe, is when this episode is going to air. So we're getting close to fall. But as we talk about some of these topics, I don't want to lay it on too heavy. We do have to talk about strategies and things like that. But today's program is probably a little more universal, the topic, and that has to do with mortgages. And it's affecting me, Professor Plum, because I'm looking at, changing residences, and maybe I'll get a mortgage, maybe I won't. Oh, gosh, this was 2-3 years ago. Maybe more. When mortgage rates, I think were what? 2.5%?
Very low.
3%? Yeah.
Right.
We talked about what do you do when you're in a low interest rate environment? Are there strategies? And then the question came up at some point, well, do you pay cash for a home? Or do you get a mortgage? Now, what was your answer, if you can think back to that, Professor Plum, back when mortgage rates were around 3%?
Right, but the answer is still consistent with what it was back then. Can you make the payment from source other than the investment? So if all I'm doing is putting money in the bank and drawing it down to make the payment or paying off the mortgage, that makes it pretty much... What are you doing? I mean, other than flexibility, you're not earning anything there.
You don't care for that. In other words, if I have $500,000 and I say, well, I got a $500,000 home, I can either pay cash for this and have no cash on me, but have a free mortgage, or I can get a mortgage and...
You might be able to do a little bit better by creating a strategy for drawing down. But remember, you may only be paying 3% in interest on that mortgage.
Back then.
But at that time. But the payment is not a 3% distribution from the portfolio because it's a principal and interest payment. So the the distribution is higher. But if you have the mindset and if you're okay with it, you could probably earn a little bit more by using a distribution strategy. So if you could get that 3% mortgage or score one like I did with a little bit less than that.
Yeah.
Well, you had bragging rights for a while. You were pushing it in everybody's face for a while.
I still have 2.75 at the moment. You know. Yeah, you are where?
2 3/8.
2 3/8. Well, you're not giving that up. But okay, so back then.
But it's a matter of you could do a little bit better. But some people, they just want to be debt free. So if we're looking at the pure finances, you could probably do a little bit better. But it's not like you're going to become a multimillionaire because of this strategy. So the question is, can you earn a better rate of return than what you are paying in interest? Now, with the interest rates being as low as they were, a lot of people didn't even get the long form when they had the interest. I mean, so the mortgage wasn't doing a lot to help you from a tax standpoint. So we could just look at, what is it costing you? It's costing you 3% on interest. What are you potentially earning over the time period that you're going to have this mortgage?
Yeah.
And so if all I could earn is 4%, and my cost was 3.5%, is that 0.5% juice in there enough to make me want to have a payment? But on the other side, if I figured I could do 6, 7, 8% overall compared to a 3% cost, now it's like, okay, I don't mind that at all.
All right,
so the answer is the same today. What is it costing you? It's just harder to earn more than the current interest rates because interest rates are higher than they were back 3-4 years ago.
So when I say what was your answer a few years ago and even farther back than that, it was a question of, okay, it's probably easier to earn something.
It was probably easier to do the investing back then, lock in that low rate for as long as possible, get a 50-year mortgage if you could have, and done it. But the answer to the question is, can you earn more? Enough more to warrant the fact that you're paying and that you have a payment every month than what what it's costing you in the mortgage.
Yeah. So if I had, let's say now, if that's the advice, and I had my example was $500,000, and I say, well, I can either invest this or I can use this. I can put this in the house and pay a house off, or I can put this in the market. Now, if I decide to put this in the market, I have to have the cash somewhere else.
Well, you could
to pay the mortgage.
I think
right?
Today you probably do. Back then, we may have been able to make an argument that you could probably overall earn more than the cost of the mortgage because the bucket number 2 and bucket number 3 were earning a reasonable rate of return, even if bucket number 1 wasn't. But now it's harder to make that difference. Bucket number 1 is still underwater compared to the mortgage costs for the most part. And bucket number 2 has some variability, but it's a matter of, it'd be a lot easier if you had Social Security and pension and other things, job to make the payment. I think it'd be easier now.
Okay, so let me just encapsulate what you're saying here, if I may. Back in the old low interest rate days, when mortgages were low, you could conceivably take this $500,000 I'm talking about, bucketize it at that time, take the income from that bucketized $500,000 and pay your mortgage with that, and still potentially have a little bit better rate of return than what the mortgage
enough better rate of return to
make it
warrant
worth
the issue. Yeah,
to make it worth it. Okay, so nowadays, with mortgages currently, when we're recording this, they're in the 6.5, maybe 7, I guess. High 6s, low 7s. It becomes a little more problematic to do it that way. Would you agree?
It does, because it's just more, we haven't adjusted our expectations, shall we say, of bucket number 2 and bucket number 3. We still expect X amount from bucket 2 or 3, but they're not very much over, or they're equal to, bucket number 2, midterm, we're expecting 5, 6%, 7% maybe.
Okay.
That's right around what the mortgage is.
Yeah.
Bucket number 1, we're expecting 4 to 5%. That's under what the mortgage is. So in the past, 3, 4, 5 years ago, when the interest rates were 3%, and let's say we had 2/3 of the money in bucket 2 and 3, we had 2/3 of the money outperforming the cost, potentially outperforming the cost. Now we have only 1/3 of the money potentially outperforming the cost in bucket number 3. Which makes it more difficult to emotionally let that work for us.
So you're less enamored with having a mortgage now.
Yeah, because you figure, go back to the distribution rate.
Yeah. With
that $500,000 mortgage at a 7% interest rate, that the principal and interest payment on a 30-year mortgage is right about an 8% overall annual distribution rate for that starting value.
Because you're paying both principal
and interest. It may be a 7% interest rate, but it's an 8% distribution from the portfolio.
Right.
An 8% distribution, it has a fairly high chance of not making the 30 years, and that's compared to a 30-year mortgage. So in today's world, my answer's changed to the point where the question is, do I have a source of money that I can make this payment from outside of the investment that I'm currently making?
Meaning you would rather take, if you had $500,000, you would rather put that into the market and pay a mortgage, if you're going to do this, with other money.
With my Social Security, with my pension, with other source, my current salary if I'm still working. Not the distribution from the investment.
So at that point, all you have to do is earn something better than the mortgage interest rate that you're paying, right?
Right. If we look back at the 3% mortgage, that distribution rate from the portfolio to make that payment was only a 5% distribution. Now it's an 8% distribution. That's the difference in how we're looking at the answer to this question. How is it affecting? Can you really earn a rate of return that is better. Like I said before, most of the money was expected to outpace the cost of the mortgage in those years when the mortgages were really low. Now it's not. It's much harder to outpace the cost of that mortgage today. And so you layer that with the emotional aspects of
having a mortgage,
or I really want to go for the gusto, or now we get into playing games like these interest rates are here today, but are they going to stay here forever?
Exactly.
So maybe I get a loan that I know I'm going to refinance within the next 5 to 10 years because it's going to go down, or I'm going to move. I'm only going to live there for 10 years. I don't know. So I think that if you think that interest rates are going to come down and you want to play the game and you want to play the futures markets here, that you get a 7-1, a 5-1, or a 10-1 arm, and you think that over the next 5, 7, 10 years, you're going to refinance back down to a 4%, sub 4% loan. Okay, that's another game. Now you just play you've got more money working for you for the longer term side.
Yeah.
And this is all, so some people like that idea. They want to make that extra money. They're pushing for it.
So
they're
okay
with it. And they're looking for a reason to invest. And other people are looking for a reason to pay it off. Which one are you? So it starts with you in your psyche, because how do we know, going back to the original answer, can you earn more than it's costing you? Well, it depends on you. It depends on your psyche, your discipline, your feelings towards these things. I know people that they're good investors. They're fine with that. And they've got plenty of cash flow, but they just do not want a mortgage. Fine. I'm not going to argue with that idea.
No.
It's a great idea. And I know other people that if they have cash, if they put everything on time,
because they think they can do better.
Because they know they can do better in their mind. It would kill them to pay it off.
So it comes down to psyche. Well, what about this factor though? If you're, as many young people are, what if you're only going to stay in this home for, your plan is maybe only 5-6 years. You're not going to stay in it for 15, 20, 25 years.
Oh, you think you're not going to.
Well, you think you're not going to, but
Well, let's say you think you're going to be there for 5 years. Don't do a 5-1 arm.
No.
Do a 7 or a 10-1, because you always end up staying long. Time flies by much quicker than you expect.
Well, that's true. But does the length of time you're going to stay in your home, does that play a role in determining whether you should pay cash or get a mortgage?
To some degree, of course. I mean, it has to do with the flexibility of when you want to buy that second, or the one down the line, having cash available to put down on the next house.
Yeah.
It makes it, you can move without being contingent seller.
Sure.
And some others. So it gives you some flexibility. But in the meantime, can you earn, over the next 5 years, you expect 5 years, can you earn more over the next 5 years? Now, it's a little bit easier because you're saying, I only need to keep 5 years, 6 years, 7 years in bucket number one. The other I can go for it. And the younger you are, the more likely you are, you're going to go for it and say, I trust the market over 7 years.
Yeah, I would think you would want to.
Even though there have been a few, not many, but Murphy's Law says you'll find it, a few 7, 8, 9, even 10-year time horizons where the stock market was not your friend.
We had one in 2000.
That was the last big one, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know of any after that, but I'm sure there were others before that.
But so it comes back to, can you earn more over the given time frame? If you say it's going to be a 2-year thing, well, first off, why are you buying? You're probably not going to make your money out of it.
No.
But the shorter the time horizon, the more difficult it is to make that work for you.
Well, that's why I was asking. So time horizon does play a role here.
It does. It also plays a role in how much you have to keep in the lower areas to make sure you make that payment.
Yeah.
But most young people don't have the money to pay off the mortgage anyway.
That's true.
They're buying purely on cash flow.
Yeah.
And the higher interest rate is kind of affecting their cash flow because they can't buy as much, they can't borrow as much, which means they can't buy as much.
Yeah. I've heard people say, and I'm people with a vested interest in telling people this, that they should never have any money sitting in their home. They called it dead equity. Do you remember when the housing market was taking off, when the housing bubble?
3, 4, 5,
right.
6, 7.
And people came out of the woodwork to say, boy, hey, you're home. You owe $200,000. I'll bet they'll give you $400,000 for it. You got all this equity in there. Why don't you take that and invest it? Now, Professor Plum.
It worked for a little while, but most people did not do very well with the investments on it. And I know a lot of I know people directly, and I've heard of a lot of other people that lost their homes later because they had huge debts on the house, no equity in it. And when the equity went down and they lost their job or something else through the great financial reset, they couldn't keep up on the mortgage payments. And now they have a tax bill.
Because they sold
they short sold the house.
Short sold, yeah. And that was considered, that's taxable money.
That forgiveness of debt
is a taxable event in this case.
Yeah, and well, it was for a long time. Now they did some changing of the fact, changing of the laws after the fact, but
because so many people
walked away from their house,
and those people vote too, by the way. So that was a factor there.
But the debt equity. I know that I was years ago. I was speaking at a seminar somewhere, and this mortgage person brought up this older individual. This lady was probably in her late 70s, early 80s, and this was in that time horizon where things were just going crazy.
04,
05, yeah. And they're saying, "Come on, Rick, tell her she should take out a mortgage." And this mortgage person was expecting me to say, "Oh yeah, let me invest it for you. We make the payment." And I was like, "Why do you want to take out a mortgage?" "Well, because you could earn more money." "Well, can you? I mean, how do you feel about a mortgage?" "I really don't like." The lady was like, "I don't really like the idea of a mortgage." Yeah. And the mortgage person was like, "But you've got all this dead equity." But the lady didn't have a house payment. So that equity was basically creating cash flow for her in the form of not having an expense.
Yes.
And to this 80-year-old lady, that was the greatest peace of mind going.
And that plays a role certainly too. Now, let's talk for a second about people who have a mortgage, but they're trying to decide, should they pay extra? We just got a 30-year mortgage. I got 28 years left, 27 years, and they say, "Boy, look at all the interest I'm going to be paying over this."
Look at all the interest you're going to be paying. What's the interest rate on that mortgage?
Yeah, well, I mean, now it would be in the maybe high sixes, but even somebody with if somebody with a lower rate of return, I've seen people with a lower mortgage rates still say, "I want to pay this off." Now, what is your opinion? And this is based, I'm sure, on interest rates.
Oh, it has a lot to do with interest rates. Now, it goes back to what can I earn with the extra. So I can make my payment. I'm going to make my payment, but do I double my payment so I can pay it off quicker? Do I add that extra $100 a month, $500 a month, whatever that extra is, so that I can change it from a 27-year remaining mortgage to something shorter than that? And look at the interest that I'm going to save because I paid it off 4 years early, 5 years early, something of that extent. So it makes, and the answer is, well, if you take that extra money and invest it somewhere
instead of paying down the mortgage,
instead of investing it in the mortgage where you know the cost, you know your rate of return, and this goes back to, if it's a 3% mortgage, do you want to earn 3% over the next 28 years?
Because that's exactly what you're doing by paying it down.
Or do you want to take that and put it somewhere else? Like, can you put it in a Roth IRA and invest it for the future? Because this is where I think people get hung up. They add an extra $100 to their payment, which will bring your 30-year mortgage down to a 28-year mortgage. But you still have the mortgage for 28 years.
And you're missing out on $100 a month.
So what could I do with that $100 a month, $200, whatever it was that I was going to be putting against the mortgage, in an investment over 28 years? I don't even have to be 28 years, over 15, 19, 20 years. The idea is that I probably can earn significantly more, depending upon the cost of that mortgage, by investing it rather than by paying down my mortgage. Now, if I'm going to have my mortgage paid off in 2 years, 3 years, then I've got a different. If my payment is $800 a month and I'm putting $8,000 a month towards it or something,
wow,
and I'm going to be done within the next year, that's different, because now my time horizon is, what could I earn in the year?
Why didn't you get a mortgage in that situation?
Well, I might be coming down towards the end of it.
Oh, as you're getting closer to it,
yeah.
I see. So you've had it for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of these factors, again, everything,
sure,
it depends.
Of course, yeah.
But it comes down to, can you earn more? And people say, but I want to pay it off early. By investing and earning more than the 3, 4, 5% that the mortgage is costing, you'll be able to pay it off even earlier.
Well, let's explain what you mean by this. And I'm leading toward this strategy that we don't talk about a whole lot, but we've said it. Let's say somebody has $1,000. No, that's a little low. Well, let's say somebody has a $2,000 a month mortgage. I don't know what's an average one, but let's say $2,000, and they decide instead to put $2,500 in. So they're paying an extra $500 per month on this mortgage toward principal, with the idea that that loan will be paid off in something less than 30 years, and they're going to save the interest on that, obviously. So instead of paying it off in 30 years, they put an extra $500 in. I don't know what it would lower it to, but maybe they'll pay it off in 22 years, 23. I honestly don't know. I may not even be close.
17.
Oh, 17. Okay. So if you have a $2,000 a month.
Right. It's roughly about a $300,000 mortgage at today's 7%.
Okay.
And $2,000 a month pays principal and interest. You'll be done in 30 years. You put $2,500 a month into it. It's 17 years, 4 months.
So now I'm done in 17 years. So somebody will say, well, gee whiz, that sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
$24,000 a year times 13, almost 13 years. That's a ton of interest I've saved.
Well, it is. And assuming you stay in the home that long, and we don't know, but let's just say you are. Well, Professor Plum, do you think that is, do you have a better way to go, potentially, than that?
Let me get back. You're hitting me with this when I wasn't ready for it.
I know. You've got your calculator, so...
Well, yes. I think that if you take that $500 a month, and instead of putting it into the mortgage, you put it into the market. Especially if you have the ability to put that $500 a month, $6,000 a year, into a Roth IRA.
Well, that's why I said $500 a month, $6,000 a year right now.
Even though the limits are a little higher.
A little higher, but that's close enough. Yes.
So we put that $6,000 away. Where would I be 17 years from now? So 500.
So instead of giving it to the bank or giving it to the mortgage company and writing a larger check to your mortgage each month, you would pay $2,000 to the bank, and then you would take that extra $500 and you would put it in. You're saying a Roth IRA, and you would invest in what?
All right, let's just say we put it in an S&P clone or something like that.
All right.
Average, we know it has averaged over the last 10, 15 years.
Okay.
Now I got to go back and do my numbers here while you're playing around.
Well, I did spring this on you. This is why we should talk before the show. Remember we said at the top of the show
not about this.
that we should be talking about. Sometimes I spring stuff on you, but you're doing the math here, and we're going to find out. Okay, so
if I do not pay the extra money against the mortgage, 17 years from now, I still owe a little over $200,000.
Yes, because you've only paid.
I've only paid the minimum payment.
But you've taken that extra $500 over that time and put it in a Roth.
Into a Roth IRA that I've invested into the stock market.
Okay.
Whichever. And what's the stock market average? 9-10%, give or take. If I do that consistently, $500 a month, say over that same 17.33 years, 17 years, 4 months, I have about $275,000
in your Roth
right
now.
So I have a couple of options now. 17 years later, I can either take $210,000, $207,000. I think that's remaining balance
out of your Roth.
Out of my Roth, and pay off the mortgage completely.
Now,
still, I'm mortgage free 17 years from now, and I still have $70,000, $60,000 in my Roth IRA that I wouldn't have had before.
Now you are eligible to take money out of your Roth.
How old am I?
If you're only 50, I mean...
Well, if I'm only 50, what I can do...
You can take the principal out.
I can take the principal, or I can just turn around and say, send me $2,000 a month from that $275,000, and I'll account for it on my tax return as a return of my contributions. And so I've done $6,000 a year for 17 years. That's $100 and some $1,000. I can pull out $2,000. I can do another several years. And maybe by then I'm 59 and a half, and then I can get to the earnings.
But either way.
But it gives me the ability to continue that payment. And so if I have the money in pocket A to pay it off, but I keep it because of other reasons, I'm still basically debt free. I have the money to pay it off. Whereas before, I have zero. In 17 years from now, I've had my house paid off, but I have no other money because I haven't saved anything else. Having that extra money being invested over that period of time, and it's a long enough period of time where we can actually do something with it, it gives you great amounts of flexibility.
Yeah.
And let's say 16, 15 years from now, the kids are out of the house and you decide, I don't want to live in this house anymore. I want to go somewhere else. Well, you can use that money to help you buy the other house while you're getting your current house for sale and getting rid of it. And so it gives you great flexibility.
Yeah. So to summarize what this strategy is, we said that if you put an extra $500 a month towards your mortgage and you pay it to the bank, you will have, in our example, it was a $300,000 mortgage, I think you said.
301.
Okay, $300,000 mortgage, and you put it toward you give the extra money to the bank, you will be mortgage free in a little over 17 years.
Yeah.
Now, if you took that money instead and you paid your $2,000 a month and you invested that extra $500 into a Roth IRA,
you're still out of pocket $500. You're still out of pocket $2,500 a month.
Right, but you now are building up your own personal Roth IRA, and you are assuming roughly what, over 17 years?
10%. Yeah.
Okay, so after 17 years, when your mortgage would have been paid off,
right,
you still owe an extra
$205,000.
$205,000 on this particular mortgage, but you've got now
in my other pocket, I've got $275,000.
Right, so you have the choice of either taking.
If I'm old enough, I can take it and lump it off and knock off that mortgage at the knees and be debt free
and still
keep
have
$70,000, $60,000 in my name.
Or you can have the Roth make your payments for you over the next 13 years.
And we haven't even talked about any potential, not necessarily there, tax benefits of having a higher interest payment for those number of years. Whereas as you pay that mortgage down, you're getting less interest, you're getting less potential tax deduction.
That's true. So you're not getting as much benefit
Although a lot
out
of people aren't getting the ability to deduct their interest anyway.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand right now.
And that's mostly because of the SALT limitation.
Yes, that was, thanks very much, the tax thing. But anyway,
my
that's the way it is.
Came down.
It could still it could change here in another year anyway. We don't know. All right, but this is the strategy. And Professor Plum, I don't want to generalize here, but I think you probably prefer that.
I like the flexibility. It's like people ask me, should I do a 15 or a 30-year mortgage? And I look at the difference in the interest rate, usually quarter to a half point maybe. So yes, the 15-year mortgage will have a lower interest rate. You'll pay less in interest over those 15 years than you would with the 30. But you have a whole lot less flexibility. Obviously, the payment is quite a bit more. So you've got a much higher payment that you have to make every month. What happens if you have a bad month? What happens if you have expenses that came out of nowhere? You get sick, you get hurt, things break around the house and you need some extra money. You've got to dip into your investments. You got to hit a credit card, do something else to make those payments. If I'm paying the 30-year, I've got a lot of flexibility. I can always pay it quicker if I wanted to. But if I have a bad month, I can always drop down to the lower payment.
Yeah.
Now, is this right for everybody? No, some people need that discipline of an actual payment to pay the thing off, because any money that's not made towards the actual payment, it's going to get lost somewhere.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
But assuming you have the discipline to save and invest that extra amount, I like the flexibility that the 30 gives me more than the 15.
And being able to invest the extra money into something like a Roth, assuming you qualify for a Roth.
Yeah, or just invest it personally or
whatever. But the Roth is nice because of the tax-free nature ultimately.
The Roth is nice. You can just stop right there. That's all you need to say. If you're eligible, the Roth is nice.
Was that the last nice thing they did for us? I'm trying to remember. Right about that same time, we had the $500,000 exclusion.
Home exclusion.
$250 and $250, both of us. That was in 97.
Right. And this actually came out of a 97 bill as well. First year available was 1998.
Right.
Roth IRAs.
So
for a whopping $2,000 a year.
Well, they've raised it to their sort of credit. Is there any other really good? I can't think of anything.
QCD, the Qualified Charitable Distribution, came out in 08.
But we've had those. Yeah, we've had those for a while.
Well, that came out in 08. It came out after the 98.
Yeah, and I guess they finally made that permanent in the last few years.
Yes.
They've raised very generously the estate tax limits. So that those making, with a $26 million estate, they don't have to pay estate taxes. I'm being facetious here, obviously. But you like this strategy. I like this Roth strategy.
I like flexibility.
I really
like
do.
the potential to earn more. I like Roth. If you're eligible for them, I love the Roth IRAs. There's a lot of things. Now, most people, especially younger people that are buying a house, don't have the excess money to play the games we're talking about. We're talking more about people where the kids are getting out of the house or
Or
you're
gone.
done with college. You might even have some extra money each month.
Weddings and college are both done.
Tell me about it.
You and I are in that. Isn't that a great boat to be in? Yeah.
But they don't seem to get that much cheaper.
Well, they don't, but it doesn't matter. At least that expense is gone. You like this, and yes, this is probably for somebody who's a little bit older and has the potential
Has some excess cash flow.
Yeah, so if you're not against paying cash, you're not against paying a mortgage. What you're saying is it comes down
It
to
depends.
Well, it does. It comes down to, can you earn potentially more on the money than you're paying in the.
It comes down to the person.
Yeah.
And whether or not you can earn more or not.
The person meaning the psyche of
the psyche. Yeah. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with being debt free. I'm definitely in that.
Hey,
camp.
listen. You know what? People have asked me. They've said, well, would you ever, if you had the cash, would you pay off your 2.75% mortgage right now? And I've said no. But there are plenty of people, and nothing wrong with that, who, if they had the extra cash available to them, they would gladly pay it off.
And it's so much easier now to say no because we can do everything automatically.
Yeah.
We can put it into a bank account that's earning more than 2.75% today.
Yeah.
And say, make this automatic.
Oh yeah.
And I don't even have to think about it.
I remember
writing checks.
Writing that check. And it was the only, back in the early 90s, I think my mortgage was, I had a 10% loan, but I think the houses were cheaper, and I think it was about $1,000. It was $1,010 and $1,010 per month. And the first time I wrote that actual check, I'd never written a check more than like $500 in my life. And here in 1990,
now you're signed up to do 360 of those payments.
Exactly, 1990. I was like 1,000. I had to write the word 1,000 on the check, and it just blew my mind that I had to do that every month. So
I think it was 12%, where it was really easy to calculate the payment because
it
was $1,000 for every 100.
Yeah, easy. I just found my old paperwork from my 1988 condo that I bought. I kept it in the garage, and we're cleaning it out. 10.5% interest rate.
Yeah. I remember when I got a house in 96, it was 7%.
Yeah.
And I thought,
whoa,
man, I'm never going to refinance this.
You and me both, man.
That didn't last.
When it went into the sixes, I said the same thing. That's it. 6 3/4. Holy moly. Well, this has been fun for me. And I think this is almost a universal topic for people.
Most people have had a mortgage, do have a mortgage, or are helping their kids and counseling them, about payments, about debt, and how to handle it.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good thing, especially if you're talking to your kids about that. Tell them about this podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast at Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and tell your kids, start listening, okay? You're going to learn all kinds of great information by listening to the Managing Your Financial Future podcast. I know you folks who have been listening have gotten a lot out of it. We do appreciate the feedback that we get on this. I haven't heard that last week's show was too technical, Professor Plum, or 2 weeks, or the 2 weeks prior to that.
Well, we'll see.
But maybe we'll hear from them. I don't know. We hope you found this one interesting. Don't forget to go to luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com, for not just all the information that you hear on this show and videos and blog posts and all that stuff, but also to get your guides, your estate planning guide. That's still up there. It'll be up there probably for at least another few months, as well as the bucket strategy planning guide. Go up, type in the search bar bucket strategy, or type in estate planning or Social Security. You'll see our guides. Those will be the first thing that come up, and download them for free. Read them and get some understanding. I'm surprised, and we're not going to talk about this right now. I'm surprised, again, Professor Plum, this is not this topic, but Social Security, just how little informed some people are. I had a question yesterday from somebody that I know very, very well, and she was telling my wife, she said, well, you can't take your Social Security benefits until you're 67 now.
Were they working?
No, I said a retired person, because she had said, well, she's going to take her benefits at 62. We've gone through this, and her friend said, oh, you can't do that. You can't. No, it's now 67. You can't. Because we were born in 1960, and I know
or
what
later.
Yeah, and I know what this person actually was born in 1960, so she thought she is not eligible.
Wow.
So anyway, but there's a lot of.
I had somebody ask me, they said, well, I have CSRS, Civil Service Retirement, so I can't take my Social Security because it'll affect my pension.
Oh,
no,
gosh.
The Social Security will not affect your pension. Now, the pension will affect your Social Security,
but you have it wrong.
But you still get more.
That's right. It's nomenclature, but it's not correct. All right. Thank you, Professor Plum. I do appreciate this. As always, if you folks have any topics you'd like us to discuss, maybe we will do some more on the Social Security thing. We haven't talked about civil service pensions in a long time.
Well, that's because most people with those have had it for quite a while because you had to have been hired before 84.
Right.
Which now, that was 40 years ago.
I realized 1984 was 40 years ago. Do you remember when 1984 was the
future
scary
book?
future? My goodness, where are we? What we're doing is we're getting older. Thank you, Professor Plum. I should have said you're a certified financial planner professional.
Yes, I am.
That's right, and an accredited wealth management
Advisor. Accountant.
That's right here. No, I'm kidding. Yes, AWMA.
I'm not an accountant.
No, you're not, and we don't have the minds for that. That's for sure. All right. Thank you again, and we appreciate everybody listening. For Professor Rick Plum, I'm your podcast host, Johnny Dean. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again, of course, next week.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated.
Past performance does not guarantee future results.
IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. S&P 500 Index is an unmanaged index and includes a representative sample of large-cap U.S. companies in leading industries. An investment may not be made directly in an index. Rick Plum is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.